Every once in a while, for a number of reasons, very popular Roblox games shut down or get fully deleted, and today we'll be looking at some of the craziest and biggest game deletions. And stay tuned because some of these games might surprise you. Firstly, let's start with the popular game Guesty, which has almost 100 million visits, and at one point this game was fully deleted by Roblox. Out of nowhere one day, the game just shut down with like no announcement, and everyone was wondering what was going on. And then the developer actually tweeted out saying that the game was falsely striked and taken down by Roblox. Basically what was going on was that this person used like a UC item in their game, and then the UC creator strike down the game and requested a takedown because they used like the UC thing without permission. And the request actually ended up going through and Roblox took down the entire game. And this situation was a bit weird for a little bit because there's a bunch of back and forth, but eventually I think the UC creator and the developer both kind of had an agreement and they kind of agreed to go their own separate ways. And eventually, after a few days, the game was reinstated. But anyways, moving to our next game being Adopt Me. And I know what you're thinking, the game's obviously still up and is doing fine, but at one point the game was actually completely broken and kind of taken down. Which is crazy because Adopt Me is one of the biggest Roblox games ever. It was over or almost 35 billion visits. So let me break down what happened. So the actual game never technically shut down, but the actual game itself was deleted. Let me just show you what I mean. Randomly, like a few years ago, when people went to join Adopt Me, the whole game was just gone. It was just replaced by the starter place. And this wasn't just like one server or anything, and it wasn't even Adopt Me's fault at all. Roblox glitched and like a big problem was going on where they completely deleted Adopt Me's whole map and replaced it with a starter place. And what's worse is that during this time, since Adopt Me wasn't there, they lost half of their players that day and everyone just stopped playing the game because they were confused what was going on. And overall, it was just like a giant glitch on Roblox's end. And this was happening to other games at this time as well. But obviously the craziest one being Adopt Me since it's one of the biggest games out right now. And it was pretty crazy because Roblox accidentally deleted like the entire Adopt Me game. And they kind of killed the game that day. Which was pretty crazy to see. Because we often see glitches and stuff happen to Roblox games, but not to this extent. And obviously not to a game that big. So it's pretty wild to see a game, with billions of visits and one of the biggest games basically get deleted. But luckily after a little bit, everything was reinstated and put back to normal. But the damage was already done. Like that day they lost so much players and probably a bunch of money because everyone just stopped playing the game. And with that, let's move to our next game, which is actually very weird. Because the next game is Guillotine Simulator, which I have to be careful how I talk about this because my video might get demonetized, but basically you just oof people in a game, which was a bit weird. And you're probably thinking like, who would play this? But at that time, this game was blowing up. It had like tens of thousands of people active, and the game absolutely blew up at that time. And it was probably on track to be absolutely massive, but it was all halted when Rolls completely shut down the game for honestly a pretty good reason. The concept was really weird, and the overall, game was very weird, so Rolls completely shut it down. Right now, it sits at almost 6 million visits. Like I said, the game was averaging so much players, they probably would have got a bunch more if Rolls didn't stop their progress. They did launch a new version of the game and kind of made it more clean, and that does sit at like 20 million visits. But obviously, a lot of the success of the game was kind of paused because right when it shut down, everyone kind of moved on. And next, we have actually Roblox games made by Roblox themselves. If you aren't aware, if you go to the Roblox profile, they've made a couple of Roblox games back in the day, but now almost every single one has been taken down and shut down by Roblox. And I think only one remains up to this day, which is the Crossroads game. And it's a bit unclear why they took these games down, but overall, a lot of people speculate it's due to like hackers, because a lot of times when you join these games, people would, exploit and hack a bunch, and it was probably just a bad look for Roblox, so he took them all down. But a lot of these games are very popular. I mean, obviously, it's Roblox themselves. For example, I think the biggest one was this being Welcome to Roblox Building, where you were just allowed to build and stuff. And the game had 20 million visits, or over 20 million visits. But anyways, moving to our next game being the Spongy Construction Project. And as the name suggests, it's a SpongeBob type game. But this game wasn't any regular SpongeBob game. This game was a pretty insane recreation of SpongeBob, and it was probably one of the best SpongeBob games out there. As you can see from the video, a lot of people even find it hard to believe that it's Roblox in the first place, and it was overall just a very cool game. But unfortunately, they made this game without the permission of the people behind SpongeBob, so it was eventually taken down by DMCA request and completely struck down by Paramount, the people behind SpongeBob. Which is really unfortunate because the game was just starting to blow up. It sits on like 2 million visits, but there's a lot of popular videos and tweets made about this, and the game was just starting to blow up when it got taken down. Now over time, they have tried re-uploading the game, but every single time they do it, it just gets taken down again. And overall, it's not the first time this happened with SpongeBob games. Another popular SpongeBob game back in the day was Terror in Bikini Bottom, which has over 30 million visits, and if you go to the game now, it literally says TIBB has been removed due to copyright. And overall, companies take down Roblox games pretty often actually. Usually SpongeBob games kind of went under their radar for a little bit, but they've always started to get taken down. But I'm sure we're all familiar with Nintendo taking down Roblox games. The most popular one obviously being Brick Bronze, which are absolutely massive, and it's probably the most infamous or famous Roblox game that got taken down because it was overall just a popular game, and well, it just got more popular when it got taken down because a lot of people heard about the story and stuff. But with that, let's move to our next game being Call of Roblox 5, Roblox at War, which is almost 50 million visits. And well, this game was taken down for a number of reasons. The main one being, well, as the title suggests, it's completely broken right now. Or it was completely broken, or it got completely broken. If you guys read the description, they kind of explained how, because of new rules, updates and stuff, their camera and the whole mechanics of the game completely broke. And also, if you look at old posts when people were talking about the game, you can see people saying that the game died out and stuff. So overall, you know, the game broke, it died out, and the project was abandoned. But surprisingly, it's not even the craziest part about the story. The craziest part about the story is that the person who made this game was the same person who made Phantom Forces, and if you read the description, he literally said that Phantom Forces was gonna be kind of like the same concept, but they're gonna rework everything. And while Phantom Forces is a clear, pretty big upgrade of this, and it's pretty crazy to see that the game blew up too. He took down a 50 million visit game and made a 1.5 billion plus visited game. That's actually pretty insane. And with that being said, our next game is Survivor, which was a game literally based off the popular show Survivor, and it has over 260 million visits. And if you go to it now, the game's what's called read description. And before I get to what they say in the description, the reason this game was taken down, I feel like it's kind of obvious. Since it was literally just a recreation of a TV show, you know, kind of one for one, the TV show themselves did a DMC request against them, and they told them to take down the game because the entire game mechanics and logo and everything was a recreation of it. So the TV eventually noticed when the game started blowing up and they took it down. But as I mentioned before, the game is now just called read description. Ever since this like lawsuit or DMCA strike down, they launched their own recreation of the show with like their own logo and mechanics and stuff called Outlaster, which is kind of the same thing but their own twist on it. And this game is doing very well. It has over 230 million visits, so not as much as the original, but it's still doing very well, and they should be safe from like getting taken down now. And once again, this is another case of another popular company taking down a game. It's pretty crazy how a lot of games base their stuff off popular games or TV shows and stuff, and then once they start getting popular, the TV shows catch on and then, you know, they take it down. It's pretty crazy to see, you know, big brands and companies take action in roles in the first place. But when you think about how much money these games are generating and stuff, it does make sense. Especially since a lot of these games, you know, rip assets sometimes one for one, or, you know, recreate stuff one for one. So it does make sense, but luckily, as you can see with this example, they kind of found a unique way around their situation. And with that being said, let's move to our last game, which is the biggest game and probably the most insane situation I've ever seen. The game being Ragdoll Engine, which has 1.6 billion visits, or over 1.6 billion visits, and it's probably one of the biggest games that has been deleted. Besides Adopt Me, but as I explained, Adopt Me wasn't technically deleted, but it was deleted in its own sense. But the actual most popular shut down Roblox game probably has to be this, because 1.6 billion visits is actually insane. And ever since shutting down, they changed the game and got rid of the icon, and they changed the name to Dumb Ragdoll Game. And the reason for this game shutting down, I think there's a few reasons, but apparently the main thing being just that the game kept getting hacked over and over again, and I guess like the owner got sick of it. But then also, correct me if I'm wrong, I remember there was a point where the owner went on some like insane spending spree because they weren't allowed to like use DevX or something like that. So the owner was kind of just like going insane, and eventually the owner's, you know, account was actually deleted. So now no matter what happens, this game will never come back and it'll just sit here as a deleted game, which is actually insane because 1.6 billion visits, like that's just wild. And it's also crazy like what happened with the developer and how, you know, the game got taken down. And it's also pretty crazy how the game got hacked. And if you enjoyed, check out some other videos checking out dead Roblox games and stuff, and I'll see you in the next one.